Hi guys, Darrell Smith from South Dakota. Today I want to talk to you about a big transition in my life. I have been in the Marine Corps for maybe 5.5 years. I had been flying jets, and it was exciting. I flew some pretty nice airplanes. I flew three of the airplanes I flew. I thought it was kind of interesting. I thought of it today. Three of them are aircraft that were flown by the Blue Angels at one time. I flew the F-9 and the F-11 and the A-4. All of those were Blue Angel aircraft. So I was flying some pretty nice airplanes, and it was exciting. I did a lot of traveling. Of course, you know by now I was a hillbilly farm boy, and I never thought I'd do anything. But I'd been seeing Hawaii. Glenda and I lived in, I think, 4 different states. We lived in Florida and Mississippi, Texas, and North Carolina. I had flown through Hawaii. I had been to Japan and to their southern island, Okinawa. I'd been to the Philippines and to Thailand, and of course, Vietnam. I visited, all expenses paid. But so it was exciting. I was flying big airplanes, and I mean good airplanes, and seeing some of the world, and there was some stability there. If I kept my nose clean, I think I could have stayed in the Marine Corps and retired. There's one catch. I had spent a year in Vietnam, and if I stayed in the Marine Corps, there was no doubt I was going back for another year. So I'd already missed 1 year of my daughter's first part of her life, up to 4 years. If I'd have gone back, I would have missed 2 out of the first 6 years of her life, and I would miss 2 out of my son's first 4 or 5 years. He was born 10 months after, not 10 months, a month and a half or 2 months after I left to go to Vietnam. So he was about 8 or 9 months old when I got home. Well, we thought it over. It was a very difficult decision. I liked the Marine Corps. It was a good organization, and I enjoyed it. And there was, like I said before, there was some security there. We made the big decision. We went off into the unknown. I started writing letters to airlines, a whole bunch of them. I did not know anything about airline flying. I didn't know about the condition of the industry. But I was lucky enough that Northwest Airlines hired me or gave me a class date. And so I can't remember walking out the door at the Marine Corps. I don't remember my last days there. My memory comes to, I think we went through Tennessee and visited with the folks on our way to Minnesota. And I remember driving a Volkswagen to Minnesota and arriving there knowing nothing about the state, knowing nothing about the airline, and all I know is I had a class date. We drove Highway 494, which runs just to the south of the airport in Minneapolis. It was fairly early in the morning, and Northwest was launching jets one after the other there. At that time, the exhausts on the jets it left a black streak in the sky, and there was 727s and 707s blasting off into the sky, and I was intimidated. It was one of those times I said, well, they can fire me, but I ain't quitting. So anyway, I showed up for class. We found a little house. First, we found a little house out in Cottage Grove, about 10 miles from the airport, and rented it, and it was the fall of the year, and I think I've mentioned before, we ran into a lady right away, and she said, boy, go outside, hike, go to the parks, because it's going to get winter here pretty soon, and so enjoy it while you can. Well, we didn't know anything about the Minnesota winter, but I showed up for class, and it was rather shocking. It was very informal, casual. The instructors were peaceful people, and they told us right away to wear the bathrooms were and what time we'd get off for lunch. And it was a shock because in the Marine Corps, you did your own. You were on your own. You did that kind of stuff on your own. But in a few, we had a class, and he talked to us for a little bit, and then he said, "Let's take a break." I was shocked. We didn't take breaks in the Marine Corps. And so after about 30 minutes of class, we wandered the halls a little bit, and that's the way it went the whole time. It was a real casual class. One of the instructors even. As he was giving, I forget what he was instructing, but he told us if he stamped his foot twice, that question was going to be on the test we would take. So as he's lecturing, and once in a while he stamps his foot, and we take note that that'll be on the test. So anyway, the testing was fairly easy, and somehow I passed. So I'm released to flight training, and we did most of our flight training in simulators, some in aircraft. Some of them we'd early in the morning before daylight we'd find an airplane or man an airplane at the airport and take it out and do landings and takeoffs and practice, usually down at Rochester, Minnesota, and then get it back in time for a passenger flight that day. Later on, all the training was done in simulators. Well, I passed the simulator check, and I had my first assignment on Northwest Airlines as an airline pilot. We rode, my flight was started in Billings, Montana, and we rode as passengers on a can't remember the name of the aircraft now, a propeller turboprop airplane, and we flew as passengers out and stayed overnight, and then we, before daylight, started our flight going eastbound, and it so happened that the captain, it was my first flight, and I was surprised to find out that the captain had just been released to fly. So it was one of his first flights. At that time, well, I didn't know anything, and the flight attendants were there and stuck their head in the cockpit. "You like a cup of coffee?" I said, "Sure." And so she brought me up a cup of coffee, and I set it right in my desk. I was at the second officers panel, which has kind of a desk on it behind the two pilots, the pilot and the co-pilot. Well, I set that coffee right in the middle. It was also my duty to talk to the maintenance personnel for starting engines. They always put hooked up, and we could talk to them. They could keep in sight, keep the engine in sight to see if it was starting properly. Well, he said, came on the intercom and said, "Hey, you guys ready to go up there?" And I cannot explain it. My right hand moved slowly across the desk, took that cup of coffee and pulled it over and dumped it right in my lap. And so that's the beginning of my airline career there. First year as an airline pilot, you're on probation. There was a pilot union, but you couldn't join it, and they could not protect you for that first year. So you were on your own. For any reason, they could just say, "No, we don't want you," and you could be fired, and that would be the end of it. So we tried to do as good a job as we could. The pay was awful. I made $500 a month for 12 months. We scraped pennies. We did buy, I don't know how we've afforded it. We bought a little house for $23,000. It had playroom, had 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bathrooms, and had 2 little apartments downstairs. And so we got a little bit of income from them. And we also worked at odd jobs to doing anything we could do to get a little money. At one time there was a new housing project going in, and some guy hired us after the construction had been done, hired us to clean the windows. There was before the people moved in. So it was a pretty tough time as a first year airline pilot. Well, I successfully did that and completed 30 years with that airline, and it was a good career, although we were on strike several times. I asked Glenda how many, 2, and she said, no, maybe 5 times we were on strike. And of course, about time we'd get our finances in order and get back to on our feet again, and we'd go on strike again, and here we go. So anyway, that's a little bit of information, and I don't know if it's interesting at all. Maybe someday I'm just documenting it for some future family member that might want to look at it, and hopefully maybe you guys would like it a little bit too. So that's my story for today. Goodbye.